another episode of Gov Tech Today. I'm Russell Lowery.
And I'm Jen Saha.
And together we try and bridge the gap between .com and .gov. Jen, I heard a fascinating episode that you had, a conversation that you had with Tim Galuzzi, and he talked about Nevada's efforts to set up a centralized security operation. They're going to need some legislation in Nevada. I didn't want to talk about that as much, but CDT had a pretty exciting announcement about their sort of SOC as a service and what's going on there. And I thought that would be interesting to both people who are planning their career from the .gov side, but also the vendor community who might be interested in what kinds of technology and services the SOC is going to be offering. So I thought that would make for a good conversation today.
Yeah, I love it. It's definitely one of those areas where sort of a centralized operation and offering those services to others can be incredibly beneficial from your client's perspective of, I'm a department that doesn't want to do this on my own. And even for the entity that's offering it. So like CDT, this could be a really big moneymaker for them. It's something they're doing anyway. And so why not open it up and offer the service to others?
Well, you say it as a service, and this is an interesting conversation that goes on in state government. And I'm not even sure that CDT hears all of the conversation because nobody wants to get sideways with a control agency. But their edict and their language and their presentation to legislators in budget committees and around the state is more and more as a service partner rather than that control agency. And certainly with the new secretary, that's been his presentation, that he doesn't want to hear that control agency language from anyone out of GovOps. And so why don't we start with that? So what is this service that CDT is going to be offering?
So you're right. CDT has control agency functions, but they also have customer service functions. And one of those is going to be in offering their security operations center. So this is 24/7 monitoring, making sure everything is on board, uploaded, functioning properly. They're offering that to other departments and agencies at the state level, but also locally. So if I'm a city or a county and I don't have the staff, my IT shop is 2 people, I don't want to staff something 24/7, but my systems require 24/7 staffing, I can contract with the Department of Technology's Security Operations Center to monitor my stuff when I don't want to.
Well, the way they described it is they want to enhance a customer's existing internal security operation. So a department won't be able to say, hey, give it to CDT and we'll wash our hands and go do other things. It's designed to be supplemental. Does that run the risk of something goes wrong? Whose fault is it? Or how will that be worked out?
Yeah, I mean, it's all in the fine print, I guess, is how it works. Like the Security Operations Center at the state level will have agreements with other departments or clients that it's onboarding. And those agreements will delineate who's in charge of what. Like they're really clear. They're not about response and recovery. They're about detection. Right. So they're going to work on the front lines of it. There's something really similar at the federal government. So their U.S. Department of Justice has a security operations center, and they offer very similar kinds of services to other federal agencies. The Security Operations Center at CDT is just taking that at a state level and rolling it out.
That will be interesting. I have a couple questions like from the vendor community side. So I've got a great relationship with the department, and my technology is in there, and we've got this working. But now they're thinking about working with CDT and farming some of this operation out. If I have a renewal coming up, or I have a service offering that my technology offers maybe a couple more features than it did last year, how should I be engaging with the department in that consideration, or how do I compare and contrast what I'm offering versus what CDT is offering?
So I think it's going to be a discussion of how all the pieces fit together. And there very well could be those areas where they're like, we don't need this anymore. We're going to get this from CDT. But CDT has taken the approach, which I think is a wise one. We'll work with what you have. We can API into your stuff. If you already are using something for threat monitoring or network and system monitoring, we can just work with that to integrate and provide you that 24/7 coverage.
That's that federated model. So
Totally.
they're going to own it still. And CDT is just going to be offering to plug gaps and fill in holes that either they've identified together or that the department has identified themselves. And they could either pick a vendor solution for that or use the CDT offering.
Now, where I do think it'll be a little competitive is there are vendors that offer SOC as a service, right? So if you don't want to do it, you can go to CDT and have them operate your security operations, or you can hire a vendor to do it. And we'll staff people 24/7 and we'll send you log information. So in that respect, it could be a little competitive, but I like to think of it as an opportunity. CDT doesn't have unlimited resources. The more clients they get, they're going to have to flex their internal staff, and they're actually looking for some help from the vendor community to operate their security operations center. So it maybe you're selling it to CDT instead of to an individual department, but I still think there's going to be a ton of opportunities for SOC as a service in general.
And I'm going to ask some questions here that might help some of the listeners in the vendor community. And I'm not asking for sort of secret sauce, but what's the process that you would go to compare what is CDT offering? Like they're going to do monitoring. What tools are they going to use for monitoring? They're going to alerting. What databases are they going to run? This MITRE attack is the superstructure, but what tools are they going to be using? How do you go about identifying what CDT is currently using to provide these services so that you can help your clients compare and contrast maybe what CDT is offering versus your own?
I think it's going to be a discussion with CDT on, their menu of services and what you as a client need, and then lining that up against what you could get from the private sector and comparing costs on that. That should be sort of everyone's consideration, right? Like apples to apples comparison, and then what does it cost?
But how does one get a picture of what CDT's SOC technology stack looks like?
They will have those discussions with anyone who wants to talk to them.
it.
They are in business development mode, which I love to see as like a state entity to think sort of like a business, and that's what this is for them. They have funding authority, but this is all funded. There is some federal grant money going towards this, but this is all funded by their clients and their customers. So they have to charge in order to cover their operational costs to operate the center.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of we don't need a bunch of details, but what are some of the included services that we're talking about from the SOC offering?
So it's definitely 24/7 monitoring. And I think this is probably the low-hanging fruit. If I'm a department, I don't want to pay one of my employees to work a night shift and monitor my systems. Like, I just don't want to do it. I remember back in the day, my mom actually worked for a department in their IT unit. And like once a month, she would have an on-call, and she would have to have her back then brick BlackBerry cell phone, whatever it is, like on the ready. Because if something happened in the middle of the night, some kind of security threat or a breach, she would physically have to drive into the office and monitor something like that. She worked for a sizable state department, but it's not always a case that you have just employees that you want to pay, or maybe you do have them, but you don't want to pay them to be on call 24/7. So you outsource that, right? You make someone else sit there 24/7 in a security
I'm going to have
operations
my
center.
internal do 9 to 5, and I'll let
Yes.
CDT do
We'll pay someone
6 to
else
8.
to sit on those other hours. And a SOC makes perfect sense because they're trained in how to do this. They're already sitting there 24 hours for all their other clients. So from the security side of it, it just makes a lot of sense just from the logistical 24/7 monitoring. They're also going to do a lot on enhancing your existing security operations. So, continuous monitoring, logging threats that are coming into your systems, those types of things. And they align, the states aligns to MITRE security framework. The feds fall back to CISA and the framework that they have there. But all of them basically are, event notifications, information management, event management, and then all of the logs. I think what's cool about, the federated framework that the state's working with is like you still own all your stuff. We're not looking to replace it. We're looking to enhance it.
I think the event notification that you mentioned bears some thought, because I'm hearing from they don't lack for information. If you're collecting all this information, the state is under constant attack in the cybersecurity realm, and prioritizing which vulnerabilities to address is a big problem. If they're getting notified of events and they don't have sort of the bandwidth to maybe remediate every single threat, which to private sector ears might sound strange. What do you mean you have a vulnerability and you just leave it unaddressed? Well,
there's
thousands of them, millions of them, with all the devices and not every vulnerability expresses is of the same category. That could be an opportunity where the private sector steps in and says, how do we prioritize a vulnerability and tie it to some negative consequence for the state? I think that could be a private sector opportunity.
I think so too. I think the other thing that this sort of whole area is primed for is AI.
Mm-hmm.
AI can do things that no one team can do internally. And so security, and we talked about this with Tim a lot during our conversation, but security is an area that's prime for generative AI use, flagging some of those threats, just expanding our abilities in a 24-hour workday, which is what a SOC is. It's a 24-hour workday. This area is prime for using some AI to sort of help us get in front of the bad actors because they're all using it. And if we don't, we're at a disadvantage.
Well, and I was thinking about this from the disadvantage standpoint, and it's more a question than I'm not sure we will land on the exact right answer, but it might be interesting to have the conversation. In the federated model, if the logs are all going to be held with the different departments as they contract with CDT, do we lose the ability to say, hey, this vulnerability or these bad actors are targeting this department? It's not personal animus against this department. Could we take that same learning and apply it throughout the state? But we lose that under the federated model when somebody comes up with a creative solution over here, but how does the rest of the state share in benefit from that information?
No, that's a really good point. And I'm sure they've thought about this, but you're right. Like it's federated to the point where they are touching all these different departments. So you would hope that there could be something gained by that in, economies of scale, first of all. Like
Right.
We're seeing this at 12 different departments. This is something we should probably alert people of statewide. I'm sure there is that type of arrangement where they can sort of have visibility into and awareness of these, threats that are hitting every single department. But from a federated standpoint, they don't own the data, but they certainly have visibility that can help everybody, right?
Right. And I wonder how this will evolve over time, but if you have these senior analysts at CDT who are getting all of this exposure from all of this department, and you have all of this expertise that's accruing at CDT, that's the value enterprise for CDT to make their SOC more valuable. But it's different. And as a private sector business, you might want to hold on to that information. So you have to come to me in order to benefit from this. But in this public sector framework, you want to share this. It's a .gov email address, and you want your .gov brethren to have it as soon as possible, whether they're paying you or not. It bears watching, and I'm not sure what the resolution is, but I'm sure the folks over at CDT will be thinking about this.
I think the other advantage that this has is the ability to negotiate for the enterprise on some of these services and tools. So I have a client actually who is working on a statewide contract in the security arena. And what that's going to allow is state departments to use this through CDT's centrally negotiated at a great deal contract, use these services at every state department should they want to.
Nice.
And actually, they all need to, like it's mandated through the state information manual and through CalSecure. So the economies of scale, I think, will serve the state well in just looking at purchasing power, really, too.
Well, as we wrap up the conversation, it might be good, you just touched on something, but every department is evaluated and scored, and they have a cybersecurity maturity metric that internally it matters within state government. Can you talk a little bit about that scoring, and does anybody actually care?
Certainly everyone should care. This is, in order to maintain the integrity of the data that your state departments hold, they need to meet these requirements. 24/7 monitoring is one of those requirements. So people have to do this. Do they have to buy it from CDT? No, they can go out to the private sector and buy it. And that's certainly a decision that every department should be analyzing and making. But CDT offering this when it's like, hey, we know you guys have to do this. We know you have to meet these requirements. Here's an easy button way to do it. You can buy it from us. I think is sort of the model moving forward that makes a lot of sense for some of these purchasing options.
And this will be the final one. I understand it. I see it in the private sector all the time where there's a financial consequence to their purchase of the cybersecurity equipment. How much money am I going to pour into this, and what's the benefit? What's my risk? And the insurance industry has now become a major cybersecurity player because what their standards are for you to get insurance becomes the minimum standard because the board doesn't want liability, the company doesn't want liability, they're insuring against a cyber attack. So they meet the standards to make sure their insurance is valid. That same economic consequence doesn't exist in the public sector. So what is the risk to a CISO that he's or she is building to because you could always spend more. The answer is
we call it in government. It's called the LA Times risk, and it's like keep your name out of the LA. Well, I don't know whatever the SACB. Pick your paper, pick your poison. But it was always like the risk of looking like an idiot, right? The risk of I did not do my job correctly. And people have lost jobs over this, right? It's your own reputation, your department's reputation, your boss's reputation of no one wants to be a victim of a breach or, a cyber attack that could have been prevented.
Yeah. Well, I think all of us have our data throughout the state government. We all want a more robust cybersecurity environment, and I think this CDT offering this gives us a chance to protect the state's data.
Absolutely.